There's a particular smell of a wash line in July that I have never once found in a bottle of anything sold at a store, and I have looked. My mother hung sheets on a line strung between two locust trees, and by the time she brought them in, they smelled like sun and wind and nothing else, and I used to bury my face in them before she'd even finished folding. That smell wasn't a fragrance somebody engineered in a lab. It was the actual byproduct of a chemical process happening right there on the line, in plain daylight, for free. Every laundry room I've ever stood in since has had at least one bottle promising to do something that particular wash line already did without asking for a dime. Soften, whiten, freshen, lift a stain nobody thought would come out. Most of what's inside those bottles is a modern, single-purpose version of something older and considerably more interesting. And I want to walk through 9 of those old tricks properly, mechanism and all, because a woman ought to know why a thing works before she decides whether it's worth doing. By the end of this, honey, I want you looking at your own laundry room a little differently, not as a place where you choose between old-fashioned and modern, but as a place where an awful lot of what's sold to you in a plastic bottle is really just a repackaged, less interesting version of something a woman with a washpot and a clothesline already had chemistry doing for her. I'm Mabel Whitman, and every trick on this list is something that actually works. Not because it's old, but because there's a real mechanism behind every single one of them. I wrote the fuller chemistry of most of these down in my book, The Whitman Household Ledger, because once you understand what's actually happening in a washpot, it changes how you read the ingredient label on everything sitting under a modern sink. So let's start with the simplest trick of the whole list, the one nearly every household still reaches for without knowing why it works. Number 9 is a spoonful of dry cornstarch, or a scraping of chalk, worked into a fresh grease spot the moment it happened, a drop of bacon fat on a Sunday shirt, an elbow in the butter dish. The old belief was simply that the powder pulled the grease out. What's actually happening is a fairly straightforward bit of physics called capillary action. Grease is a liquid. Cornstarch and chalk are extremely fine and porous, and a porous powder pressed against a fresh liquid stain will draw that liquid up into its own structure, rather than letting it soak deeper into the weave of the fabric. The honest limit is timing. This works beautifully on a fresh stain and does almost nothing for one that's already set and dried, which is exactly why she moves so fast whenever grease hit cloth. Once a grease stain has had time to fully soak into the fibers and oxidize, no amount of powder is drawing it back out again. And everybody in that kitchen understood the difference between a stain caught in the first minute and one that had sat through supper. Number 8 is plain table salt, worked into a fresh stain, blood, wine, the juice from a berry patch, before it ever went anywhere near hot water. The old belief was that salt set a stain in a good way if used quickly, and in a bad way if you were careless with the order of operations. There's real chemistry underneath that instinct. Salt draws moisture out of a fresh stain through simple osmosis, the same basic principle at work in a smokehouse. And separately, salt is still used today in the textile industry to help certain dyes bind permanently to fabric fibers, because the extra ions in the water reduce the natural repulsion between a dye molecule and the fiber it's trying to stick to. That's the turn worth sitting with. Salt can either help lift a stain or help lock a dye in place, depending entirely on what you're using it for and when, which is exactly the kind of nuance that got lost once everything came pre-measured in a single bottle marketed for one job. A woman doing wash by hand didn't have the luxury of a single all-purpose product anyway, so she learned which job salt was doing on any given morning, the same way she learned which knife was for bread and which one was for meat. Number 7 is bluing, a tiny amount of blue dye, historically Prussian blue or ultramarine, added to the rinse water for white fabric. This one sounds like it shouldn't work at all, and that's what makes it my favorite piece of laundry science on this whole list. White fabric that's been washed and worn tends to pick up a faint yellow or gray cast over time. Blue and yellow sit opposite each other on a color wheel, and when trace amounts of blue land on that yellowed fabric, they cancel the yellow out to the human eye, rather than adding a visible tint, leaving the fabric reading as a cleaner, brighter white. It's not bleaching anything, it's pure optics. Companies were selling bottled versions of this exact trick. Reckitt's Crown Blue out of England, Dolly Blue out of the Lancashire Ultramarine Company, well over a century ago, and modern detergent makers still quietly add blue tone brighteners to their formulas today for the same reason. The honest limit is that too much bluing stains fabric blue instead of correcting it. So the old hands who used it treated it the way you'd treat a strong spice, not a splash of water. Number 6 is borax, a mineral salt mined right out of the ground, stirred into the wash alongside soap. The old belief was that it made soap work harder. The real chemistry backs that up on 2 fronts. Borax raises the alkalinity of the wash water, which helps soap cut through grease more effectively, and it also boosts the bleaching action of hydrogen peroxide when the two are used together, breaking down into compounds that release oxygen more readily. There's a wonderfully specific bit of history behind this one. Borax was hauled out of Death Valley, California, by literal 20 mule teams between 1883 and 1889. And once Francis Marion Smith consolidated the mining operation in 1890, the company built an entire nostalgic brand around that mule team image, starting in 1891, to sell the very product every laundry room in the country was already relying on. It's worth pausing on that, child. The mule teams themselves had already stopped hauling borax out of that desert by the time the picture of them became the whole marketing pitch, which tells you something about how much further a good story travels than a plain fact. The honest limit on borax is that it's mild rather than dramatic on its own. It's a booster, not a standalone cleaner, which is exactly why it was always paired with soap rather than used by itself, and why the old recipes that survive treat it as one ingredient in a system rather than a miracle in a box. Number 5 is washing soda, sometimes called sal soda, a stronger cousin to the baking soda in the pantry. Dissolved into hard well water, it does something specific and measurable. It binds to the calcium and magnesium minerals that make water hard, pulling them out of solution so they can't react with soap to form that filmy scum that used to dull colors and leave clothes feeling stiff. That's not a vague softening effect. That's a direct chemical reaction, And it's the same basic principle modern water softening systems are built around, just running in a barrel instead of a machine. The honest limit is that washing soda is genuinely caustic in concentrated form, harder on bare hands than plain soap ever was, which is exactly why the old hands treated it with more respect than they gave an ordinary bar of soap, measuring it carefully rather than pouring it in loose. Number 4 is a wash done in genuinely boiling water, with a hard bar of lye soap reserved specifically for whites, diapers, and anything that had been near real sickness in the house. The old belief was that boiling cleaned deeper. Modern science backs that instinct almost entirely. Heat dramatically speeds up chemical reactions, including the ones that break down protein-based stains and kill off the bacteria that plain cool water and soap alone will only partially remove. The honest limit is that boiling isn't kind to every fabric or every color, which is exactly why it was reserved for the whites and the linens, rather than used on everything that went through the wash. Wool would felt and shrink under that kind of heat. Colors would run and fade, and a woman who boiled the wrong basket learned that lesson exactly once before she started sorting more carefully than any modern washing machine cycle dial ever asks anybody to. Number 3 is starch made at home from nothing more than potato water, the cloudy liquid left behind after potatoes had been grated or scrubbed and rinsed. Left to sit, the water clears and a fine white layer settles at the bottom of the basin. That's not sediment or dirt. That's pure starch, the same dense, gritty granules that make a potato, simply separated out because starch doesn't dissolve in cold water. It stays suspended just long enough to be poured off, then settles out on its own once it's given time to sit still. Diluted into a fresh batch of water, that starch was what gave a collar or a cuff its crisp, ironed stiffness, decades before starch ever came in a spray can. It's genuinely the same starch chemistry a modern food scientist would describe in a potato, just extracted by hand instead of by machine. The honest limit is that homemade starch this way is inconsistent by nature. One potato never yields quite what the last one did, and a woman using it had to judge strength by eye and feel, rather than by a measured ratio printed on a box, which is exactly the kind of small, constant judgment call that got engineered out once starch started arriving pre-measured in a can. Number 2 is sunlight itself, used deliberately, not just as a place to dry things, because there was nowhere else to hang them. There are 2 real mechanisms working at once on that clothesline, and it's worth naming both. Ultraviolet light breaks apart the chemical bonds in a lot of organic stains, which is genuine photo-bleaching, not folklore. It's the same basic process that fades a curtain left too long in a sunny window, just aimed on purpose at a stain instead of an accident. And separately, sunlight has a real, documented antimicrobial effect. Solar disinfection using ultraviolet radiation is an established method that public health researchers have studied specifically for its ability to inactivate bacteria in water and on surfaces. And it's part of why a diaper or a dish rag hung in full sun for a day came in smelling clean, in a way that shade-dried laundry simply didn't. The honest limit is that this works on organic staining, and on many microorganisms, not on every kind of stain. A rust mark or a set-in dye isn't going anywhere just because it caught some sun. And the effect isn't instant either, honey. It takes real hours of real exposure, which is exactly why laundry hung out at first light. And laundry hung out at 4 in the afternoon never came in looking quite the same. And number one, the trick that gets asked about more than any other, is a splash of plain white vinegar in the rinse water. Diluted acetic acid, nothing more exotic than that. Here is the real chemistry, and it's worth being precise about it, because vinegar is doing 2 different jobs that people usually lump together as one. First, in hard water areas, that mild acid genuinely reacts with the calcium and magnesium minerals built up in fabric fibers over repeated washes, actually dissolving those mineral deposits the same way vinegar dissolves limescale in a kettle, which is exactly why clothes can come out of a vinegar rinse feeling less stiff. But here's the honest limit that most vinegar enthusiasts skip right past. Vinegar isn't a true fabric softener in the way a bottled softener is, because it isn't coating the fibers with anything at all. Bottled softeners work by leaving a thin, lubricating film of compounds on each fiber. Vinegar works by removing residue and lowering the water's pH, which helps rinse soap out more completely, a different mechanism entirely, and one that happens to solve a similar problem from the opposite direction. Understood that way, it isn't a myth and it isn't magic. It's one specific, well-documented piece of real chemistry, doing exactly what real chemistry does. The same acid, in the same mild concentration, is also perfectly suited to breaking soap residue left behind in a machine's gasket and hoses, which is the other reason it earned a permanent place in so many laundry rooms, long before anyone was calling it a natural cleaning trend. I'd love to know down in the comments which one of these your own grandmother swore by. The blue bag on a string in the rinse water, or the vinegar bottle kept right next to the detergent, close enough that everybody in the house knew exactly what it was for. The truest thing on this whole list is that none of these women were guessing. Every one of these tricks survived because it kept working, wash after wash, year after year, long enough to get handed down on purpose. Notice this week how many of the products lined up in your own laundry room are really just one of these 9 ideas, repackaged and given a brand name. I set the fuller chemistry of each one down carefully in the Whitman household ledger, because a trick that survived 100 years of actual use has usually earned the right to be understood, not just repeated.